You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel, 5785, 2025. This week's Parsha, we don't read the Parsha this week. We are going to read from the Shiras Hayom. It's the seventh day of Pesach. We're going to read from the Song of the Sea. Am Yisrael is at the point of getting out of Egypt. Pharaoh is chasing after them with 600 chariots, men in chariots. Am Yisrael experiences an awesome revelation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as they walk into the sea splits. And miraculously, they're able to walk through on dry land. And the Egyptians follow after them and are drowned. I'd like to share with you a thought from a Rosh Hashiva. This is also in his Haggadah. But it's also, he has a whole section on the Parshas in here. And he gives us an incredible insight into what Geula looks like, what redemption looks like. He points out that the very beginning of the song at the sea is Az Yashir Moshe B'nai Yisrael Hashir Azos. They started singing this song, and this is what they said: Ashir El Hashem ki ga'oi ga'a. I will sing to God, for He has done amazing things. He has done things that we're all proud of, things that make Him great and high above everyone. He took the horses and the riders and He caused them to have their downfall in the sea. Now, my Rosh Hashiva points out, and we'll read it inside shortly, but he points out that this is clearly a theme that goes through the song. It's also the main, or the only thing really, that when the women sing the song, they also only sing about Sus v'rach be'ram avayom, the fact that the horses and riders were thrown into the sea. They came to their final fate in the sea. And the question is, why is the beginning of something is always the focus? It's the foundation of it. Why is the foundation of the Song of the Sea about the fact that the horses and chariots and the riders were pummeled in the sea? What is the idea? What is the teaching here? Let's read it inside. Kanireh. Says Rabbi Per Zechariah Levracha. Pasuk Zehu Ikar Ashira. This is the main part of the song. Dareyu Pasuk Rishon. This is the first verse. V'chein Shetaychnai Chayzer Kama Pa'amim. We find inside of it, as we continue in the song, we review this theme a number of times. Markabas Para V'chela Yorav V'yom. The chariots of Pharaoh and his mighty legions were thrown about in the sea. Uvchar Shalishav Tubu B'Yamsuf. And the choicest of his men, they were drowned in the sea, in Yamsuf, the Sea of Reeds. Nashavt beruchacha kisam hayom. You blew with your wind, and you covered them with the sea. Yeshiras Miriam Kulo, he rocked pasuk zeh. The entire song of Miriam is only this pasuk. He points out, in contrast, is very interesting. When Yisro comes, Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, he comes to join the Jewish people, bring Moshe's wife, his two sons. So what does he talk about? When he talks about the experience that he had, looking as an onlooker, he speaks about the fact that they tried to cause your downfall. Hashem, blessed is God that He saved you from the hands of Pharaoh and his men. The very thing that they tried to do was done to them. There was a midah keneged midah, a measure for measure. The Egyptians tried to cause the downfall of the Jewish people with water. They threw their firstborn children into the sea, into the sea, into the Nile, and they were destroyed with water. Their downfall came with the water. This concept is the concept of measure for measure that they were judged with. So this is something that Yisro was amazed by. He saw the measure for measure. When you see that something happens precisely according to what the person has done wrong, they receive a punishment very, very clearly in a parallel way to what they did wrong. So that punishment, we say wow. When you see that come out, it's so clear. Haman tries to hang, he builds this huge gallows to hang Mordechai, the Jew, upon, and he is hanged upon those gallows. We can think about today, the Iranians, how they're building a nuclear weapon which they hope to destroy people of Israel with, and in return they're going to be destroyed through that. They themselves will have their downfall. Right? So that's Midah Keneged Midah. When you see something so clearly, that's an awesome measure for measure punishment. It shows the great clear judgment of Hashem. It shows that those who do wrong, they receive wrong back in a clear way. And that's what Yisro saw. That's what he mentions. But it's interesting, the way that our sages and the commentaries on the shira, on the song, when they speak about the song, they don't talk at all about the Midah Keneged Midah. They don't speak about the measure for measure aspect that's going on here. We could explain that it's only Yisro who saw things from an observer's point of view. He wasn't a slave himself in Egypt. So he sees everything with a certain coolness. He sees it from outside. He sees it with an objective view. But the children of Israel, they themselves experienced the destruction. Their spirits were broken by the galus, by the exile. They felt it on their bodies. They felt it in their spirits. Their honor was lowered. They had an experience which was very different than what Yisro saw. They had experienced Hashem's quiet for 210 years. They were lowered. Their honor was decimated. They were treated like bulls of burden, beasts of burden. And Hashem didn't say a word, as it were. Nothing was done to stand up by Hashem for the honor of the Jewish people. Right? It means that Hashem stood up for Am Yisrael's honor. Hashem showed who really is the good one, who really is the chosen nation. So when God stands up for our honor after so much time of being under the boot of those who are spiritually depraved, it was through the destruction of these 600 chariots, all of these chariots of Egypt. This was the very power that the Egyptians used. They had to rule over others. How did they have that power? They were a world power at that time. It was through these 600 chariots it manifested their power. What did Hashem do? Hashem took their kavod, their honor, which was represented by these chariots, and he dashed it, he smashed it, he destroyed their honor, he decimated it by having them have destruction in a very unusual way. Right? If you think about it, how are chariots going to be destroyed? We wouldn't think that they would be destroyed in the sea. That's a very weird place to find your end. How did you end up there? It's like, imagine you hear that Nasrallah, instead of getting killed by Israeli bombs, so he drove one day and his driver accidentally lost control of the car and flew out over a dock and into the sea. That's a real bizayon. That's a real embarrassment for him. Well, the Dugma, he gives an example here in parentheses. Let's say we would hear about the destruction of a great military power in our times. We would expect to hear that they were destroyed in a normal way. The tanks were blown up by passing airplanes. The boats that they were using to try to destroy, to shoot their missiles at their enemy, the enemy aircraft came in and destroyed those boats. But But let's say things were different. Let's say I'm sorry, I said something a little wrong here. Let's say you would hear that the boats, the military boats were sunk, so that makes sense. And the tanks were destroyed by aircraft, military aircraft. That would make sense. But let's say things were the opposite. Let's say you heard that the tanks drowned. The tanks ended up in the water and they were destroyed there. And the boats were destroyed by mines. Because we never heard of such a thing. The very strangeness of it, the way that they came to the destruction, was something unusual. They were destroyed in the sea. That's not a place where they should be. They fell off a cliff. What a bizayon. What an incredible embarrassment for them. So you see that Hashem raises up the honor in the moment when it comes time for Am Yisrael's honor to be raised up. Hashem raises it up in a way that's an incredible bizayon, an embarrassment to our enemies. Think about the beepers. That's amazing. That sounds like this. So So now let's come back to Yisro and Klal Yisro. There's a really fundamental difference between the way that Yisro saw the whole story and the Jewish people saw the whole story. For the people of Israel, for the Jewish people, it wasn't a time of learning something and contemplating something. It wasn't an intellectual exercise in trying to understand Hashem's great salvation. Am Yisrael had an emotional experience. They were joyful. They were raised up. What an incredible thing Hashem has done for us. Look at how Hashem has stood up for our honor and redeemed us. Yisro wasn't part of the story. He didn't experience the hashbala, the lowering of his honor through this whole story. So his view of everything, as we said before, was very cold and calculating. He saw, oh wow, God acts measure for measure. He saw things from a purely intellectual way of seeing it. Am Yisrael experienced it in an emotional, ecstatic experience. Now what happens after this? Says Rabbi Per, immediately after this, so they traveled to Mara. They traveled to a city called Mara. Now listen to this. This is an incredible concept, an incredible idea. The incredible idea is that we know that when Am Yisrael came to a certain place, so they needed water, they were thirsty. And the waters in that place where they came to was very bitter. And what was done in order to sweeten those waters was something very unusual. Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to take a particular piece of wood, throw this wood into the water, and then the water became sweet. Now, what was unusual about this story is that the wood that he used was a bitter wood. It was the kind of wood that was bitter. He threw something bitter into water that was bitter. And the miracle was that although something bitter should make something else bitter more bitter, it should have added to the bitterness. So the place was called Mara, which means bitter. That was not the result. The result was that you took something bitter and it counteracted the bitterness somehow. When Mechilta Issa, the Medrash says, the way of Hashem is so different from the way that human beings do things. If you want to make something sweet, let's say something's very salty, you add as much sugar as you can. You want a cup of coffee, you want it to be sweet, you add the sugar. And you might want to add 2 times the amount of sugar to the amount of coffee you put in. Well, but Hashem does something different. And it's an incredible lesson. Hashem, if he wants to cure something that's bitter, so he uses something else that's bitter. Something that's bad, he takes something else that's bad, he throws it into the thing that's bad. Because he wants you to see when it's appropriate for us to see the miracle. He wants us to see the miraculous way that Hashem interacts with us is that he takes something that seems like it should be the opposite, and he gives it to us, and it somehow sweetens things. Yishayahu, Yisro divlas ta'enim. There was a particular story with Yeshaya Navi. I'm not familiar with the story so well, so I'm going to do my best here. Where he was told to take, or he told others to take a divlas ta'enim. And he was to take a figs, and he was to place them on a particular kind of wound. And the thing is like this: if you have an open wound and you put figs on it, it causes the wound to get worse. Okay, it said the instruction here was a spiritual instruction. The instruction works in the opposite way that you would think. He took something which should cause damage to a wound, put it on the thing that was damaged, which was the wound, and the miracle occurred. Psukim say it in Malachim that there was a miracle that happened. Again, a similar idea where there was waters that were bitter. They took a bitter piece of wood and they threw it in, and somehow it sweetened the water. Sorry, they put in not a piece of wood. They put in salt. If you put salt into water, it makes the water salty. But it had the opposite effect. Unbelievable. The Kosev al Malbim, the Malbim explains there, says Rosh Hashiva, we see, the point here is, Hashem wants us to know that the miracle is the opposite of nature. When you have a miracle, it's the opposite of the way things should ordinarily be. There are rules to nature. In nature, so certain things, if you do them, there are natural consequences. If you want to make money, you can't throw money away. Right? If you want to make money in a natural way, you can't give charity. That's throwing away your money. But if you want to live in the world of miracles, it's the exact opposite. The more money I give away, the more money Hashem sends me. The way is that the very thing that God uses to cause a wound is the very same thing that He uses to heal the wound. Just like it was when Chizkiah HaMelech was sick, he had these boils, so Yeshaya Navi gave him the divlas ta'enim, he gave him the figs, and that's what cured him. And the salty water, the waters of Yericho were cured by the salt. We find when people were wounded by snakes, they were bitten by snakes in the midbar in the wilderness. So they were told to look at a snake on a pole, the famous snake on a pole. And that's what cured them. As our sages tell us, the idea is that look at the snake. You want to be cured of the snake, but you need to look at the snake. That's what I need to do. I need to go back into the place of the trauma, back into the place of destruction, back into the place of the place that I was wounded. That's where I find my healing. Yes. That's the teaching. The teaching is I need to go back into the pain. That's where I find the healing. This is a deep psychological vort, but it's a spiritual vort. It's a spiritual idea. That's the Malbim. Okay, so let's sum up so far what we have. Before we finish off here, we have one more concept my Rosh Hashiva is going to share. We have two ideas. First idea is Am Yisrael experienced it themselves. Yisro was looking at it from the outside. We had a Yisraelimus. We experienced Hashem standing up for our honor. And we had an emotional praise of Hashem. Yisro sees things measure for measure. He sees there's a lesson to learn, but he sees it in a cool and calculated way. We also see that there's a concept of the miracle expresses something deep spiritually. And that is that the very thing that we go into, the difficulties, the mistakes that we make, the gullus, the exile that we're in, which seem to be bad, which seems to be destructive, those very things somehow lift us up. Spiritually, they have the potential to lift us up in a miraculous way. He says like this, besides for this, there's also a lesson here of measure for measure. We see here that the reason that they threw a piece of wood that was mar, that was bitter, into the water, that was bitter, is specifically because it's bitter. If they weren't bitter, you wouldn't have needed a bitter piece of wood. The point here is, as we've been speaking about the whole week, I am Hashem, I'm the one who cures you. All the troubles that I experience, all of the difficulties that I go through, all of the challenges are only there for me to become greater spiritually, to rise up, to become a greater human being. They're there to cure me. This is where Am Yisrael learned the lesson that Yisro already figured out. This is where we see that there's a measure for measure situation. It wasn't appropriate for them to learn that lesson when it came to the splitting of the sea. They didn't have to experience, Hashem was doing kindness to Am Yisrael. We didn't have to learn the lesson of midah keneged midah, tasting bitter waters, and then learning that in order to get out of the bitterness, I need to bring something bitter to it. That's how I experience Hashem's spiritual salvation, is through the bitterness. That wasn't the lesson that needed to be learned when they were having that ecstatic moment at Yam Suf. Can add that we see that with the song that they sang at that time, which we're going to all sing tomorrow, because tomorrow we celebrate and remind ourselves of that song, of that salvation, of how Hashem raises up the honor of Am Yisrael. Think about how low we were during World War II and how much Hashem has lifted up Am Yisrael over the last 75, 77 years. How much has Hashem lifted us up as a nation, given us back our national honor. But he says that that song, at that time, with that ecstatic song, as Hashem raised up our honor, it was the moment that at this point, it made sense for them to go into the land of Israel at this point. And to destroy and to conquer all those who would try to stop them. They were all trembling in fear. They were all wishing to do peace treaties with the people of Israel. It could have been if Moshe would have led Am Yisrael, if we wouldn't have made mistakes with the golden calf, with the spies, we could have walked right into Israel. Moshe Rabbeinu would have been Mashiach. We would have built the final Beis Hamikdash right there and then. We would have lived forever. Each person under his geffen, speaking of Tachas Gafnai, you see right behind me, my geffen, my grapevine, each one under his fig tree. Don't have a fig tree in my backyard, but we do have a new rimon tree, which is growing beautifully. But what stopped it? What stopped us from walking into Mashiach's times, in those times, it was the sin. An amazing thing. Our enemies were running after us. They wanted to destroy us, and you don't have to think that far in the past, just about a year and a half. They're running after us to destroy us. And still in the present moment, they're running after us to destroy us. But what was the result? It was because of the fact that they ran after us to destroy us. If not for the fact that they had been stuck in that small space, Egyptians on one side, the water on the other side, nowhere to go. If not for that, we're stuck. We're crushed. But that was the moment that resulted in this song. It came out that the most difficult moment for Am Yisrael in that period, which we celebrate tomorrow, is the reason for the song. They saw themselves as lost. The awesome, the awesome positive experience that they had with the Shiras Hayam, with the Song of the Sea, was a result of that difficult moment that they experienced. And you can translate that to today's times. And as the things continued, as the story continued, they went from the splitting of the sea and they walked over to Marah. They came to the place with the bitter waters. They didn't have anything to drink. But that experience as well, that purified them so they could get the lesson of measure for measure, that Hashem uses something bitter to sweeten the thing that's bitter. If we've done what's wrong, think about it. We did a chait. The punishment is not there to destroy us. It's to purify us. It's to clean off the sin. We also learned that Hashem is our healer. Hashem heals the bitter waters. And Hashem heals our souls. Hashem performs miracles for us. It's specifically from that difficult and harsh experience that all the good comes from. From bitter things come sweet things. This teaches us that every situation that we find ourselves, specific situations, general situations, individuals, Am Yisrael as a whole, shetamanu toiv, v'tamin maybe toiv, that it's always for our good. And everything Hashem intends for us to have a positive experience ultimately from. I want to bless you and ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us to take these messages to heart, to recognize the miracles that He's doing for us all the time. Hashem should help us to see these miracles in our lives. Hashem should help us to recognize that the darkness in our lives, the challenges in our lives, the bitterness in our lives, ultimately is there for us to learn from and to come out with a sweet result. Hashem loves us so much. May Hashem help us to see that love, to see how all the bitter situations ultimately really are positive situations. And may Hashem help us to merit to see the Ashir Hashem ki ga'oi ga'a, sus v'rach v'rama v'yom, how He raises up and exalts us, the honor of this nation who has been embarrassed and shuffle and lowly for so many thousands of years. May Hashem help us to see the raising up of Am Yisrael's honor and the resulting downfall of the enemies of Am Yisrael. And may we all sing together the future song. May that future song be now. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful Yontif.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.